Hey everyone, I hope all of you are enjoying Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which is now available on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC. And in this video, I want to try to discuss something that I think I've seen a lot of people have a little bit of a hard time trying to understand, and that is the difficulty of Sunbreak, and specifically when it comes to the changes Capcom decided to do when it comes to the Afflicted Star 1 and Star 2 quest in the most recent patch. Of course, this being a discussion video, I certainly want to hear your guys' feedback if you're having a tough time or a good time doing Afflicted hunts in your very own experience, so do let me know in the comments how it is that you're actually handling the difficulty of Sunbreak. And before we get started, again, there's some basic table setting that needs to be done. If you don't necessarily know, Afflicted hunts are pretty much unlocked after you finish the story mode and you beat the final boss. And basically, they are monsters that are powered up by the Curios from Malzeno or the final boss themselves. These monsters have a much higher health pool, they hit you a little bit harder, not necessarily as hard as we originally thought before leading into the launch of the game. They do have higher resistances and they cannot be trapped. They can be trapped in the middle of the hunt, but you cannot capture them after to finish a hunt. The reason why you actually want to hunt these monsters is because you're getting constant rewards to be able to power up your weapon and basically make it true end game ready. So it's something that you're going to be wanting to do if you are trying to get the most powerful weapon available for whatever class or whatever weapon type you're choosing to play. Now, every single monster in Sunbreak does not currently have an Afflicted quest. There's about 31 different monsters that have Afflicted quest. The toughest one that you'll find is probably Magnamalo Afflicted. Anything below that, like a Kezu, Great Isuchi, a Great Ragi, Arceros, Tetranodon, those monsters have an Afflicted quest. Anything above like a Zinogre does not have a currently Afflicted quest. Those are going to come in free title updates heading into the future, and Capcom has already confirmed that. And the discussion here begins when Capcom just recently put out a patch and they basically said in their very own patch notes that Afflicted Star 1 and Afflicted Star 2 quest, the health of all monsters and the attack power for some of the monsters has been adjusted. Now, originally people thought this actually meant some of the monsters might have been powered up, some of the monsters have been made weaker, but we now know that all this basically means is that their health pool has been made lower, has been made lesser than it was before. I believe it was expected to be somewhere in the 70s to 80,000 health pool. I believe some of them have been dropped to 60,000 or so, some to 65, and middle of 70s, somewhere around then if they had higher health. So they have been made easier in that regard, and the attack power for most monsters has been lowered just a little bit. But again, this is just for Star Afflicted 1 and 2 quests. There are 4 Star Afflicted levels, so some things like Blood Orange Bishaten, Gyarados, Shogun Senator, the aforementioned Magnamalo, Garangolm, Nargacuga, these are star 3 and 4 monsters. So those have not been touched at all by Capcom. We're just talking about the easiest monsters. We're talking about things like a Kezu, a Nagnasam, a Bishaten, a Daimyo Hermitor, a Kuluyaku, a Great Ragi, those type of monsters. So those have been touched by this specific patch note. So what does this all actually entail? Well, a lot of people have taken it to basically mean that monsters have been made easier in order to cater to the babies of the world. Basically, the people who are wiping, dealing with Afflicted monsters, which we do know that they give you Blood Blight whenever you get hit by one. But in order to get hit by one of these monsters, you basically have to be not paying attention at all. They are kind of like the most basic monsters of all. We're not fighting a Afflicted Rajang or an Afflicted Malzeno just yet. Those are going to come in free title updates. So right now, if you're kind of getting beat up by a Afflicted Tetranodon, you know, that's kind of like you have to get better. You have to get better armor, that kind of thing. It's not really on the game to really make it easier for you. But that's how people have taken this patch to actually mean. Capcom decided to make the game a little bit easier for those people, and they should probably just stick to basic Master Rank. And I think there's a little bit of misconception there, because what they're trying to say here is that making the health pools a little bit lower doesn't actually make the monsters easier, because the monsters are still going to hit you in the same way that they were hitting you before. They have the same moves, they have the same attack patterns, none of that is actually changing. What it means is that the hunts, which were taking 15 to 20 minutes for people who were rushing into Afflicted hunts, they were not properly geared, and they were basically having a long time to be able to take down these monsters, 15 to 20 minutes. Now you're just probably going to take 10 to 15 minutes to do these basic Afflicted hunts. Again, Star 1 and Star 2 Afflicted monsters are not really set to be a true challenge. It's about getting you geared up and what to expect when you get to the further monsters up ahead, and the ones that are going to be dropping as free title updates and DLC. So the thing is, if you're fighting a monster over and over and you kind of understand their attack patterns, they're not really hitting you, they're not putting you in danger, your health is not constantly dropping, and it's only taking you, 10 to 15 minutes to be able to take it down, only because they have a much bigger health pool. That's not really a challenge. That's not really difficulty. Difficulty comes from a monster really pushing you. They're too fast for you, they're hitting you too hard, they're extremely agile, their attack pattern is constantly changing. Things like that is what makes difficulty, and I think Capcom has still been struggling trying to figure that out in the past few games. They just think having more health pools means more difficulty, and it really doesn't mean any of that, because all you're doing is giving people a longer hunt, but not necessarily a more difficult one. So while I do err on the side that afflicted monsters, when it comes to specifically online, if you're hunting them with 4 people, they have a ridiculous amount of health and probably too much to begin with. So I'm actually okay with the fact that they actually went ahead and addressed some of the health pool adjustments. What I'm more concerned with is how they're going to approach afflicted monsters in the free title updates, and how they're actually going to adjust their health pools going forward, because monsters that haven't necessarily dropped just yet, again, let's say afflicted as an ogre, might actually end up having less health now than they would have originally, and maybe even the lower damage output that they would have originally. So what we end up fighting is just a slightly more powerful Sinogre that's not even going to be in the same tier in comparison to the base Monster Hunter Rise Zinogre in high rank versus the Apex version of high rank Zinogre, the Apex Zinogre. And that thing was a pain in the ass to actually hunt, because it hit hard, it was agile, it had new moves, it just kept doing things that you didn't necessarily expect it to do, where the high rank version of Sinogre was just pretty easy and, wasn't necessarily that much of a challenge. What concerns me is that we could have had that again with Afflicted Sinogre, but it doesn't necessarily seem we're going to get that now, because if they're starting to adjust the health and the damage output of monsters that are available right now, they have no real reason not to do the same thing going forward for more of the afflicted monsters that we're going to get in the future in free title updates. And that's, I think, my biggest concern going forward, just how much easier they're going to be making those monsters, because people are struggling with these now, that those in the future are going to be made a little bit easier in anticipation, knowing that people are probably going to struggle with them if they just leave them as is. Therefore, they're going to need to make them a little bit more approachable for people going forward. And again, those being free title updates, they want people to be able to actually hunt those monsters, not just kind of throw them in with the rest of them and, never become an actual hunt that people want to engage with. So that's really all I wanted to bring up when it comes to afflicted monsters and the health pool adjustments in the most recent patch. I know a lot of people have had opinions on that. I certainly want to hear your guys' opinions on this matter, because again, everyone views difficulty in their very own way. For me, I think Sunbreak has been difficulty-wise fine, especially when it comes to single player. I've been having a lot of fun because monsters are not pushovers in Master Rank and single player, but when it comes to online, I think they just have way too much health, and it's not really that much of a challenge. Again, especially when you're just staggering them the entire time, or putting them in paralyzed, or just knocking them over, it's not really that much of a challenge if they're just sponging all this health, but they're not necessarily a danger or a threat to me, even as a gunner. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.